Hasan, this isn't content. Why do these people care about what your non-expert has to say about all this? You're a cosplayer, bro. Quit yapping. It's ironic because, yes, I do actually, this is literally my area of expertise. In comparison to the average commentator in the United States of America, both to my right and, the liberal content creators as well, I do have the specific knowledge to communicate about events such as this one.
All right, well, we promised we would keep you updated on Hasan Piker and the whole socialist field trip to Cuba, and that's exactly what we're going to do, because this is going about as you would expect. As a matter of fact, I'm willing to say today, it is officially over for the Cuban regime, because if it was not already a bad enough picture for them, the fact that these people right here are apparently the ones who are here to save the government, right? This is their backup. This is their assistance. Their call for help was responded to by people like Hasan Piker and Ariel the Mermaid, middle-aged, past the wall version here. It's done for them. Okay, what else can we say? And to briefly recap for you what is going on right now, essentially a bunch of socialist activists out of America decided to go on this trip to Cuba where they claim they're going to be delivering humanitarian aid and saving the Castro regime. But in reality, as you would think, all that's really happening here is they're being given a guided state propaganda tour and essentially a free island vacation for the weekend, which even other leftists are calling out as performative and hypocritical, given the fact that you claim, oh, Cuba's starving, they're very short on electricity, which they are. And then, of course, people like Hasan Piker are using up a bunch of Cuban electricity and bandwidth in order to do their stream, make their content, ensure that they can be in comfortable air-conditioned rooms while the regular people of the island are stuck in the heat. I know, very socialist of them, right? Very leftist. But anyways, we'll tell you all about this here today. I just want to show you some of the overall ridiculous and unserious scenes that we have seen here. First, though, do us a favor. If you enjoy our content, make sure you hit that like button down below. Subscribe to the channel if you are new. We greatly appreciate the support, but it also ensures that you can stay up to date with all the latest news and coverage. And to recap again, yesterday, Hasan Piker officially announced he is on his way to Cuba to deliver humanitarian aid, food, medicine, and solar panels. Cuba has always been there for others. Now it's our time to be there for Cuba. And I love this reply right here. Haven't the Cuban people suffered enough? Yes, exactly. Haven't they? Without, you showing up and doing that. But anyways, that said, so apparently today, Codepink, which is a very radical feminist organization, as you'll see right here, chartered their whole private plane to go to Cuba, which, okay, just check it out for yourself, okay?
Here we are on our way to Cuba! And we're here to say, Cuba sí, bloqueo no! Cuba sí, bloqueo no! Cuba sí, bloqueo no!
So we're on the plane now getting ready to go to Havana, Cuba. We have this entire charter flight full of people and, as important, full of medicines. And we're so excited to be with the Cuban people and show our support, show our solidarity, and to say that this cruel, inhumane, barbaric policy of the Trump administration has to go.
Dear gosh. As I said, it is literally so over for the Cuban regime. It has never been more over than it is right now. Okay? If you needed confirmation, they're on the verge of collapse. There it is. There it is. Now, rightfully, these characters are getting torn apart for what they're doing here. As one example, yeah, she is flying first class to tell Cubans about how bad capitalism is, which is exactly what is going on here. Another person points out, these despicable political tourists will shake hands with the regime, bask in the Caribbean sun, take selfies at the Che Guevara monument, and then return to a free country, leaving the Cuban people to rot in the communist hellhole, which, spoiler, is exactly what is about to happen, right? This is the most stupid performative gesture ever, and yes, it is basically a free vacation for them. but they're basking it under the guise of morality. Oh, we're delivering humanitarian aid. Oh, are you? What are you delivering? Some spam cans in your carry-on or something? Like, what you really think you're actually making a difference here? Well, honestly, you are making a difference. As I said, you're helping to bring about the collapse of the Cuban regime because you are that much of useful idiots here. And again, I mean, being any serious, third world communist person watching this and realizing, oh, these are the Westerners who support me. I repeat, I think if Fidel was alive to see this, I think if Che was alive to see this, they might have just dropped the revolution. Okay, so here's only wishing that Codepink was around in the 60s to show up to Cuba and go help out back then. I think they would have. I think that we would have avoided the past 60 years of nightmare and chaos if that had happened. But anyways, here you can see one of these Codepink leaders in the picture with Hasan Piker, and I'm not even gonna say anything. Okay, the picture speaks for itself. These are the people apparently who are going to save Cuba. Yeah, again, it has never been more over for them than it is right now. And of course, another person here points out, with full air conditioning and in a brightly lit auditorium, bear in mind, on an island where electricity is extremely scarce, the foreign communists who have traveled here are now giving a standing ovation to the Cuban dictator, with half the island in a blackout and going through a terrible situation for the propaganda of all these immoral people. There is fuel, which is exactly the case, right? Exactly. They spent, basically the Cuban government, much like the North Korean government does with tourists, is they basically say, oh, pool together everything we have nice as a country, put all the power so that way we can put on a show here for the Westerners while we're hoarding that electricity away from the people, and the useful idiots fall for it. They say, oh, wow, Cuba looks so nice. It looks so advanced. Oh, they have electricity. Can you believe it? Hilarious. But, we're not dealing with very smart people here. And by the way, I'm not surprised by this, nor should you, because anyone with 2 brain cells could put together what was happening here. But I do want to point out, they initially said this was just going to be a quote-unquote humanitarian aid mission. How much did we hear that? Oh, it's not about the Cuban government. We're just here to help the people. They're starving. They need power, etc., etc. And then there you have them standing up and cheering for the Cuban dictator. It turns out, no, it was about the government and defending the government the entire time. There's a lot of people starving around the world, by the way. There's a lot of countries that have very poor power grids. There's people who just live with no electricity straight up in a lot of parts of the world. Why is it particularly that you chose to go to Cuba right now? It has nothing to do with the people. It's about the fact that they want the Cuban government to stand. They want it to survive because to them it is a symbol of anti-Americanism. It is a symbol of global international leftism. And that's what this is all about. So, I repeat, you shouldn't be surprised by that. We knew from the beginning these people support the Cuban government. That's why they're there. But just want to point that out for the detractors who are going to say, no, it was just about humanitarianism. Is that humanitarianism going on right now? Right? Using the electricity to stand up and cheer for the dictator? I don't exactly think so. But anyways, it's so bad that even people like Destiny, who is a deranged liberal and someone we obviously cannot stand for many reasons, including the fact that he's basically cheered on the assassination of Trump supporters. I mean, he is actually that deranged. But I will point out in this case, okay, Hasan Piker and the Cuba Brigade are humiliating themselves so badly that they're even getting called out by characters like Destiny. So Destiny said about the whole situation, from flotilla to flytilla, LMAO, which is basically to say, initially they made it sound like they were going to do the Gaza thing where they're going to take some boats and go there and it's going to be this big mission. And then in the end, they're just showing up on a private charter jet. It's pretty hilarious. So, but anyways, this MFer gonna go to a country experiencing a blackout in humanitarian crisis and stream for 2 days in a fully conditioned, air-conditioned room wearing a $5,000 outfit with reliable power? Well, yes, indeed. That is exactly what Hasan Piker is, of course, currently doing in Cuba. And yeah, I mean, you could certainly point out how hypocritical and strange it is to be hoarding their electricity while claiming, oh, the people need the electricity. And then you're going to go there and use it for your performative activism. But, as usual, you're watching a lot of virtue signaling going on. what should we expect? Now, that said, in total fairness, I will point out that apparently, although Codepink and them were flying on this private charter jet, I guess a different leftist group is apparently showing up to Cuba using an actual flotilla, like showing up on an actual boat, and I have to spoil it for you. It's not much better, okay? Oh, really? You came on your little sailboat there. I'm sure this is going to change everything, right? This is going to save Cuba single-handedly, don't worry. We came on our little fishing boat. We got some granola bars. Hey, do you want a Lunchable? Yeah. It's gonna change everything, ladies and gentlemen. Of course, assuming that a single piece of this aid actually makes it into the hands of the Cuban people, considering that the government are the ones going to be handling the distribution, and these useful idiots, I'm going to take a wild guess, are not going to bother to check where the aid actually goes. So, the typical story. And then at the end of the day, what they're further going to claim if the aid doesn't make it to the people is, oh, this is the fault of the embargo, right? This is American imperialism is the reason why the Cuban government that we're being useful idiots for and supporting keeps on literally stealing stuff from its own people. As you see, by the way, even on the course of their aid trip, because supposedly they're out of fuel, they're out of electricity, but when it comes to hosting the left-wing influencers from America, they have plenty of fuel and plenty of electricity. So there you have that. And here's another case. I guess you have the activists now. They're being put on these little trams. Okay, they're basically going to go on a safari through Havana. Oh, honey, look, it's a Cuban person. Look, take a picture. And, but keep in mind, right? This is an island that has very little gasoline, considering they're not getting any imports of oil. The average people, they don't have any freaking gas. They can't drive the cars. But, as I said, they're basically using the reserves that they have to host the influencers. So take a look at this right here. Yeah, so as you can once again see, the supposed humanitarian aid mission is rapidly descending into a state propaganda tour. And by the way, you got to make sure the leftist influencers, they can get their pictures for Instagram so they can say, oh, I was in Cuba. And by the way, make sure the left-wing Americans get their electricity so that way they can look good and sing songs and be very performative in front of everyone. I'm honestly, at what point is a Hollywood celebrity going to go to Cuba? I think we need that. I think we need one of these stupid people who gave speeches at the Oscars or the Grammys. Hey, go on your own tour of Cuba. Go, hoard electricity from everyone else to show what a good person you are. But anyways, that said, the Cuban regime, I guess to an extent, is getting exactly what they want, because some of the lefties who are going to the country are trying to make these videos about what they saw on the state propaganda tour and why the country is so amazing. And let's take a listen here, because this might actually be one of the dumbest things I've ever heard in my life, but take a listen.
Trump wants us to believe that the Cuban people are our enemy, but all I have seen since I have been here is a people fighting to preserve their dignity and their sovereignty. Honestly, the most amazing thing about Cuban society today is that it's been built collectively from the ground up by the people. The reason that society here continues to defend itself against attacks and the inhumane U.S. blockade for over 60 years is because of the power, prowess, and commitment of the Cuban people. I mean, that's exactly why the U.S. policies always seek to target the people in hopes of causing dissatisfaction among them. The U.S. knows the power of Cuba's revolution resides with the people. That's why they've failed time and time again to destroy it. And when I say the ground up, I really mean the ground up for real, people. The neighborhoods are the sites that people contribute to the democratic processes of the country and build a culture of mutual support and resilience. Together, the Cuban people take care of each other. They ensure their neighbors with difficult life circumstances can eat, that the elderly can get their medications, that when Trump goes and imposes tightened restrictions on their country, that nobody gets left behind.
Okay, so here's what I love about this video. First and foremost, how do you know the Cuban people actually do that? Right? Keep in mind, you've been on the island for 2 hours. You're on a state propaganda tour. How do you know that's even happening in Cuban neighborhoods, right? I'm just saying, you know, to be clear, I have no reason to believe that doesn't happen because, yes, you know, obviously when a government completely fails its own people, humanity kind of comes together. Yes, normal people rally around each other. But I'm just pointing out, she was here for 2 hours. Basically, the government and the state propaganda tourists told her that's what happens in Cuba because, I repeat, she hasn't been there long enough. She hasn't lived there. She hasn't observed it herself. Oh, they just told me that's what they do. And then, you know, she's running that as fact, which I find to be pretty hilarious. But that said, you have to even appreciate the overall argument here and how stupid it is. Because, okay, so what happened here? She went on a state propaganda tour, which you can see in the videos. It's a guided tour of people putting on a display for her, right? So she goes on that. She essentially concludes that the Cuban people are nice people. And apparently, because the people are nice, that should dictate U.S. foreign policy. I don't exactly understand. I'm not sure whoever disputed that the Cubans were not nice people, right? As a matter of fact, I would argue that, yeah, it's just the truth. A lot of, not all, but a lot of countries you go to around the world, especially those that don't typically get a lot of tourists, you will oftentimes find that the people are extremely hospitable and nice and kind and funny, you know? Like, I don't doubt, at least going as a man, that if you went to even a country like, say, Iran, or I've seen, you know, people who go to China, places like that. Yeah, in general, you know, normal average people on the street tend to be nice, friendly people. Yeah, they're human beings. Yeah, humanity exists around the world, you know? By the way, I don't think Americans get enough credit for this. I think we're also nice people. But yeah, you go abroad, you'll meet a lot of nice people. What does it have to do with U.S. foreign policy, right? Like, you know, I fully believe that the average person in Cuba is probably a very nice, hospitable person. And geopolitics aside, if you could just go there and spend a day with them, you probably find out they're pretty chill, right? And that's true of a lot of Latino cultures in general, right? They're kind of like family friendly, hospitable. I get it. What does that have to do with our foreign policy? You know? Just an amazing argument, truly. Oh, I went to Cuba. The people were nice. Therefore, we shouldn't try to topple the communist regime in power. What are you even talking about? But, you know, clearly you can see the IQ level that they're trying to appeal to here. It's very lazy. It's not very smart. And clearly the Cuban regime understands how stupid the people are that they invited to go be useful idiots for them. And so they don't have to make a particularly complicated argument. Oh, just be nice to the stupid woke Americans. And then they'll think, oh, well, we should be on this team because they gave me a free cigar or something. It's just very stupid. Very easy to buy the opinions of these people. But of course, what do you expect? Should you really be surprised by that? Of course, you may have heard of this guy. I guess he's sort of the other content creator who's teaming up with Hasan Piker. Kneecap, stating, that's his like streamer name, right? Stating, we're in Cuba as part of the Nuestra America convoy. And just take a look at this cast of characters. I repeat, these are the people who are supposedly here to show up and save Cuba.
We, as Irish people, were Britain's first colony. And we have grown up in our whole lives with an understanding of colonialism.
Yeah, I know, right? What a highly serious group of people. These are the diplomats that are going to change history. We have two douchebags wearing sunglasses indoors while at a serious geopolitical press conference and dressed like some kick streamers. And then on the right, we even got Rey Mysterio, okay? Rey Mysterio is going to save Cuba, guys. He's going to give Marco Rubio the 619 5-star frog splash from the top rope. This is going to change everything. So, there you have that. I guess Kneecap is trying to pretend he's the IRA or something, but in reality, they turned what's supposed to be a thing about politics and humanitarianism and all this into looking like it's a press conference for a UFC or celebrity boxing match or something. I mean, what the heck is going on here? But again, I repeat, these are the characters who showed up. This is who's coming to Cuba's rescue, which is why I will once again say I don't think it's exactly looking all that good for Cuba. Of course, domestically here in the United States, it's actually pretty interesting what's beginning to happen amongst far left groups because people like the DSA, the Democratic Socialists of America, I'm sure you're well familiar with this organization, can't even agree on whether or not the dictatorship aspect of Cuba is actually a good thing. I repeat, these people call themselves the Democratic Socialists of America. They very often, as you may remember, try to distinguish themselves, as Bernie Sanders did, from communists, right? We're not the communists. We're not even regular socialists. We're democratic socialists. We're really these just harmless people who care about healthcare. And then here they are basically defending the Cuban regime itself, or not even agreeing on whether the dictatorship is a good thing or not. One person here is about to basically state the dictatorship aspect is irrelevant. And then the other person basically is like, no, you're wrong. The dictatorship is a good thing. I repeat, alleged democratic socialists, by the way, not just a front organization for like literal, actual, violent, hardcore, tanky communists, or so they say. Take a listen.
This question about whether Cuba is a dictatorship, to me, as a Cuban American who's had those conversations a bajillion times, it's completely irrelevant to the fact of what is happening to Cuba because of the government that I pay taxes to. So we need to make a low barrier of entry move. Okay?
I would just like to say, I would shift that a little bit, because I actually think that it's a problem for us to separate out our support for the people versus the state. It's the Cuban Revolution that, expropriated the wealth of the expropriators and redistributed it to the people. And that's what made Cuba a model and has helped to show us that another world is possible. We must, in our messaging, defend the Cuban Revolution.
Well, to the first guy, who is basically a Cuban-American traitor, I would say that how can you call it irrelevant when it's the entire reason you're in America to begin with? Okay, then why don't you go live in Cuba then? The Cuban Revolution's amazing, but you don't want to go experience it for yourself. But then the second girl is very clear to make it honest where these leftists stand and 100% say no. It is the state, it is the government, it is the dictatorship itself that American leftists in this country 100% are endorsing, and she's making that crystal clear. So if there is any defense, if there was any out, if there was any Jane Fonda style stupid excuse that, it's about the people. No. She says, let's make it crystal clear. We endorse the Cuban Revolution. As a matter of fact, she celebrates it. Did you hear what she said? As their model. This is their model for America. So, when I say that these people want to turn America into a third world country where infrastructure, everything is completely dysfunctional, people are starving, crime is rampant, et cetera, I'm not actually joking about that, right? Like the utter failed state that Havana is right now, according to them, they claim is their model, okay? She even praises the Cuban regime for redistributing the wealth, which, was very often violent under the Castro regime. But as I said, these people are just straight up communists. But nonetheless, okay, I would then ask that question, if that model was so fantastic and they gave the wealth back to the people, then why aren't the people wealthy today? Shouldn't that be a basic point? If your idea works so fantastically, why isn't the island thriving today? They, according to leftists, if you just took the stuff from the rich people and gave it to the poor people would thrive and prosper because everything was just rigged against them. Okay, so why didn't that succeed? Actually, as it turns out, the redistribution of wealth is a terrible idea. It doesn't work for, honestly, a very specific reason. Like, for example, if you have one person who is a grocery store cashier and another person, let's say, is like a NASA engineer, and you flip the roles, you basically put the grocery store guy in the role of NASA and then the NASA guy in the grocery store, which is honestly kind of a good analogy for very often what, communist regimes have done throughout history with agricultural reform, sending the people from the cities to the countryside, all those things, right? Land reforms. Then quite expectedly, the NASA engineers, the space program is going to collapse because you put people who are completely unqualified. They don't know what they're doing, right? And it's the same thing, frankly, with the redistribution of wealth and the changing of roles and these guaranteed government jobs. You're putting in people who are unqualified. They don't really know what they're doing. It's sort of like DEI on a massive scale. You could argue to a degree that's actually what communism is. And then obviously those things are going to collapse. So, you wonder why, for example, right now, Cuba's infrastructure is completely crumbling. However much they want to blame the embargo or something like that. No, it's actually not an accident, because you basically put these central planners in charge who don't know best. They don't really know how to manage the jobs they've been given and the roles in society they've been given. And so the whole thing falls apart, and Cuba's far from alone in this, right? The same thing happened in the Soviet Union, in China, in Vietnam, in a lot of these places before they either collapsed or did some type of reform. Because why? Communism literally just doesn't work. Now, these people told us, we're not communists. And then we're like, no, but Cuba's our model. Okay. What did Fidel Castro publicly call himself? in the mid-1960s, a Marxist-Leninist. So, you know, we repeat, a lot of these like useful idiots who claim that they're just fighting against American imperialism or intervention, foreign intervention or something like that. At the end of the day, much like they did during the Vietnam War, you realize these people are just like straight up communists, and that's the only reason they care so much about it, right? It's very telling which battles they try to pick to fight and don't. So, but anyways, there you essentially have it. Again, what a colorful cast of characters here, and you know, I'm sure this is going to go over very well with the Cuban population in America. But just remember, guys, this is the Democrat Party for you. Amazing. And they're going to save Cuba. Don't worry. Hasan Piker, he's here to save the day. It's over for them. All right, that said, let me know your thoughts. Be sure to leave a like on this video, subscribe to the channel if you are new. And until next time, God bless and peace.